I want to hear really about your life.
Grew up here in Melbourne and I grew up in public housing. Times growing up were really, really tough because we just had no money growing up. Both my parents were dealing with serious mental health issues and they were long-term unemployed. Really what it came down to is mental health problems and substance abuse. Me, my little brother and sister had a life that was very hopeless. My entire childhood was just this experience of stress, sadness, things not working out at all.
What does Purpose Productions mean to you?
I've been doing this for 7 years now. I really view it as there are these different disciplines like finance, marketing, project management, systems and operations, vision. Like what really excites me is getting really good at this whole process. Being able to look at an entire business and say, I've built something great. There's no holes in the game. There's no parts that I'm unaware of. And it's taken a really long time to build this, but I've built something that's actually great. That is a huge driving force for me. Really where it comes from is this idea of growth. That's what really excites me.
My name is Rugare Gomo. I am your high performance life and business coach and strategist. I work with all people who want to bring their dreams and goals to life with velocity. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, retirees, moms, dads, innovators, all people. People who work with me have said that they experience more freedom, more joy, power, abundance, creativity, and peace of mind. If this is you today, come and work with me and have your BAM moment that will change the trajectory of your life forever. Visit my website, www.rugaregomo for more information. My name is Rugare Gomo, and I am your high performance life and business coach and strategist. This show exists to inspire and empower you to dream, forge your own path, and be the leader of your life. And today I am just delighted to have my friend James Shadrach on this show. Hi, James.
Hey, Rugare, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. So James is a true testament to perseverance and entrepreneurial grit. He created Purpose Productions in 2017. Hailing from modest origins in Melbourne, public housing, James' journey is a remarkable tale of triumph and adversity. With a keen eye for opportunity and a knack for building relationships, he swiftly grew his business, assembling a dedicated team and securing major clients like National Tiles, Lander and Rogers, the law firm, Deakin University, and even the Australian government. Over the past 7 years, Purpose Productions has flourished into a respected entity in Australian business realm, offering high-quality video production services to clients across the nation, of which he does that for me as well. And James' recent endeavor, the podcast Scale, caters to entrepreneurs seeking insights into scaling and selling their businesses. So I'm so grateful to have my friend James here, and thank you so much for being here to share your story with us today.
Thanks. And I appreciate the intro as well. It's always funny hearing people speak about you, but I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we've been on a really long journey together, Rugare, because you've coached me through some of the craziest times in my journey. You've been right there in my corner.
It's kind of wild and crazy because the first time I met you was actually when you were working as a receptionist
Yeah.
at a co-working space called The Cluster.
Yep.
And at that time, one of my mentors was like, you have to meet James. You know, he's up to stuff. And so that was the beginning of our friendship together.
Yep. Seems like a long time ago. Hey.
I can't wait to share the story with the audience in more detail. But before we go there, what are some words you live by?
What are some words I live by? I think the main one for me is growth, always seeking growth, and sort of being able to coach myself through the inevitable challenges, failures, and setbacks that we have. And I think for me, it'd be growth would be one word that I live by. And I suppose another would be endure, like being a person who can endure the inevitable challenges of life.
Fascinating. So the two words you live by are growth and endure. And
Yeah.
when you say that, what shows up for me is like being able to meet life on life's terms. And life is rocky. It doesn't always gives us roses. It can give us lots of thorns. But how are you going to endure the journey while walking on those thorns?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
So today we're going to be focusing on your journey of how you came about forging your path in life. But tell us a bit about yourself and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so these days I run a video production business here in Melbourne. It's doing pretty damn well at the time being. We've got a great amount of clients that we work with, and we do everything from podcasting to large scale video productions to short form content. So that's my day today. I run that business, and I'm mainly doing sales and managing my team.
Amazing. So let's deep dive into your backstory that has led you to creating Purpose Productions. And uh, I want to hear really about your life.
Yeah, so there's a lot to it. It's sort of a long story. I suppose the best way to give context is I grew up here in Melbourne, and I grew up in public housing, so commission housing flats in a suburb called Hyatt. And times growing up were really, really tough, mainly because we just had no money growing up. And both my parents were dealing with serious mental health issues, and they were long term unemployed. And sometimes people ask about this story, they're unsure as to why there was the long term unemployment. And really, what it came down to is mental health problems and substance abuse. So, growing up, me, my little brother, and sister, we just had a life that was very hopeless. And really, my entire childhood was just this experience of stress, sadness, things not working out at all, and just feeling that nothing's moving forward. It was a really challenging and difficult time growing up.
No child should ever have to go through that. The idea of going through childhood is a safe home with empowered parents and opportunities for children. But you had the opposite of that. And so, how then did you either break through all of that to create the life you have today?
It's a good question because there's been lots of different parts of how I've been able to get out of that situation. Um, and I think just to give a bit of context on there as well, I think all throughout growing up, I always wanted to have a better life. Like I was always imagining if things could be better or hoping that things would be better. Even before I got into any type of self-development, I had the intention of imagine what it would be like if, we had a little bit more money, or maybe like one day, I could get a job, or one day I could have like my own partner, and then, eventually ended up meeting my wife. But all these things right at the start, I just remember this deep feeling of wishing and hoping and feeling like it was so, so out of my reality to get those things. Um, my parents' relationship deteriorated over time. So as I was growing up and going throughout school, I actually grew up in a pretty wealthy area. So there was a mix of less fortunate kids and kids who actually went to private schools or had parents who were very wealthy. I was part of this whole mix, but little did anybody know that at home I was dealing with this constant turmoil and fighting between my parents, where on a regular basis, there would be shouting, screaming, threats of violence, threatening to call the police, like just the home sort of completely hostile. And that's what was going on in my home life. And so I'm trying to navigate through school, through making friends, through figuring out who I am. And it just made me a really sort of insecure, unstable, shy, because I had no foundation. So a lot of the really painful experiences I had as a kid growing up of not being able to fit in, not being able to connect, not really understanding why I was so weird or why I wasn't as relaxed or as fun as other people, was all this nonsense that I was dealing with at home. And I suppose the culmination of all of this was when I was about 17, my parents split, my mum left. And through that time, things got a lot worse and her mental health deteriorated. And I essentially became her carer for a while when I was about 18, 20. And it got worse and worse. Unfortunately, it got to the point where she attempted suicide. And that was probably the hardest point of dealing with all of these stuff, is essentially a young kid trying to manage, my younger brother and sister, trying to get a job, and then trying to manage this crazy situation with my family. Thankfully, she went through rehab and she's since gotten a lot better. But that sort of, from when I was like a baby up until about 20, I'm just dealing with this huge amount of stress, setback, like totally not a normal experience of being a child. And I want to go on and on about this, but just it's taken me a long time to realize how weird my upbringing was and all the different ways it's influenced me or warped my view of the world. So a lot of my journey has been going back and healing from these things to make sure that what happened to me as a child doesn't impact me or limit me in my future.
Very powerful and very vulnerable. What I related to was, as a child, you had that hope of what life
Mm,
could be in the future. That was me too, growing up in Zimbabwe. I was
yeah,
like, I dared to dream, like, what would it be like to actually go overseas? What would it be like to
yeah.
actually go and do a course in forensic science, which never existed in Zimbabwe? What would it be like to be in a country that respected human rights? Even that in itself sounds ridiculous to say, but that was some of the things I dreamt about. So I could really resonate with that, the dreaming in your life. And then you spent practically your whole childhood in a bubble, and you said that you've been learning that your childhood was weird. So are you saying that for most of your life, you thought your childhood was normal?
It's a good question. And it's actually part of a trauma response is to normalize things. And so it's very common with people who go through things like that to view it as just, oh, that's just how it was. It's part of a defense mechanism. And even sometimes, maybe even as I'm talking, I don't always emote so much when I'm talking about really sad things. That's still part of a trauma response to those things. So, uh, I've always thought that I've dealt with it relatively well. And really, the experience is just peeling back layers and layers of, oh, I thought I had got most of it handled, but there's this little thing or there's that little thing. There's a additional part to this that I'll share a bit later on in the in the explanation of the story. But even to this day, I'm uncovering things and ways that it's influenced me.
So what was the instigator to then break out of that bubble, that environment that was holding you back?
Yeah. So I think there's this whole idea out there that hope is not a strategy. It's a common thing that we say in the entrepreneurial world because we need to be practical and have real plans. But I firmly believe that hope is a strategy. And particularly when you're starting at a really low place, sometimes hope is all you have. And so my first starting point was just hope for a better future, hope that things could one day get better. And I was very much intuitive and just more of a feeling person when I was younger, less pragmatic, less practical. And so I felt like maybe the universe had just put this thing in front of me, which was a video called The Secret. I'm not sure if you've watched this before, but somehow this video, when I was a kid, made it into my home and I watched the whole program of The Secret. And that program talked about the idea of the law of attraction and really thinking about what you wanted. It's an interesting take on things because I do believe you need to have the practical plans and taking action to match it. But a huge part is thinking and believing and focusing on what you want. So at a very young age, I started watching this and it just resonated with me and seated deep within my mind that whatever I felt when thinking about that or watching that, I needed to go that way. And it just pushed me on this path of constantly trying to feel that way again, of growth, expansion, being empowered, thinking about my goals, thinking about the future. And so it started with that. And then as I got a little bit older, it leaned me into personal development. And I remember a time when I was around 18 or 20, and I was really dealing with some heavy things. And I always liked to go down to the beach and the ocean because I felt like it was very calming for me. And so I remember I can't remember exactly what was happening, but I just remember this deep feeling of sadness that I was holding on to. And I was in a very bad mental headspace. And I remember just sitting down on the sand and putting my little headphones. And I can't remember if it was like Tony Robbins or Stephen Covey or some self-development success tape. And I just remember thinking, I don't have the mental strength to deal with what's happening. I'm just going to brainwash myself with something positive. And I just hit play, lay down in the sand, and just listened. And really, the whole shift for me of getting out of that situation was just brainwashing myself with personal development. So at 20 or about then, I just listened to every single personal development tape I could possibly listen to, just trying to brainwash myself to have a positive mindset. That's really the starting point of me getting out of that situation.
So powerful. It all starts with hope. A lot of the things that I've discovered about my life is if I can't think it, I can't create it. So
Yeah,
I know it's not tangible, but it is the starting point to actually be able to think of something outside of ourselves. But of course, we can't think of anything outside of ourselves. So we need external
yeah,
influences for that. For me, that was books. I
yeah,
read so many books growing
yeah,
up. And for you, it was the tapes, you know, and that's life-giving.
yeah.
And, you just reminded me of President Barack Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. You know,
Mm,
even President Barack Obama says it starts with hope. And if we're
yeah,
looking at, the campaign that Kamala Harris is doing right now, she's coming from a place of joyful, being
mm,
hopeful and joyful. My
mm,
experience is that hope and joy always wins out in the end.
mm.
So then, once you are brainwashing yourself with these positive messages, where did that lead to in your life?
Yeah, so I basically studied psychology and I was going down the whole academic pathway, and I chose that so I could learn more about what had happened to me as a kid and why my family dynamics were so dysfunctional. And so I was on a trajectory to be a psychologist, but as I was listening to all these tapes and learning all these things, I got this itch for business, and I just felt drawn to the idea of business and trying to start something. And so after my fourth year of psychology, I completed my honors, and then I said, I'm going to go out and try and start a business. And I basically tried a whole bunch of different ideas that all failed. And I basically went backwards and I tried to start a business after uni. It didn't work. And then I got a sales job. But my whole idea with that was if I can just spend time with business people, I'll be able to learn about business. And so I literally just typed entrepreneur into seek.com.au, which is our job seeking site here. And that allowed me to find business minded people, which eventually landed me in the cluster, which is a co working space. And that's how I met you. It's how I met Jeff, who we both know and both connected us. And that was really the start of me meeting the whole entrepreneurial community.
That's powerful. And your hope was then matched by action in essence. But you had a very clear plan there. You tried your psychology course. you closed that door, a new door opened up for you in business and you followed that through. So what I'm really hearing is you tried things on and kept figuring out what captured your heart.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, once I had made the decision that I wanted to learn about business, it's one, having the humility to realize you need to learn from people. And two, just learning all the skills that you need from other people. Because what I didn't have, because I didn't come from a business family, I didn't have a dad or an uncle or a family friend who was teaching me business things. The truth is, a lot of business savviness gets passed through family and relationships, knowing that that's how much you should charge for something, or this is how you should enter a negotiation, or this is how you should conduct yourself. And so some part of me realized I didn't know that stuff. So my whole goal was, how do I learn as much of this as possible so I can bridge my knowledge gap? That's why I worked out of that co-working space. So I could just constantly see, all right, how are people doing things?
It's so powerful. When I left the law and work in a startup, one of the things I created was I was going to be the right-hand person of the co-founder, attend all his meetings, do all the follow-ups, learn how to communicate right, all of that. And I
Yeah.
said to him, I want to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And I
Yeah.
think what is so great is that there's always specificity in everything that you were creating. There was specificity in everything that I was creating. I didn't know it was going to work out or not, but that's what I had decided to do and follow through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so when I was working out of that space, I really reached a pivot point, like a crossroads sort of situation, because I had this idea to start doing video production as a business idea. And I was still working at that space and then doing video production on the side. And it was getting to the point of, well, do I try and do this full time, or do I still keep working half? Like, what am I going to do here? And I eventually had to just make the leap and have faith that things would work out, and just quit that job and try and start a business. Um, and mind you, at this time, it was it was very stressful to make that decision, because I hadn't really worked any type of professional job. Being the receptionist at that co-working space was the most professional job I'd ever had up until that point. And I was also living with this idea in my mind that my family hadn't been professional or worked or had any long-term employment. So every year that I'm employed, I'm solving for all this terrible stuff that happened in my past. And so it was really stressful to make that decision, because I knew business might not work out. But I think just having maybe even the naivety just to try that is what allowed me to make the jump and then go for it. And there's so many different challenges along the way, and things are so stressful and so challenging. But I really do believe this whole idea of, if one door closes, another one opens. Or if you just take that action and have faith, opportunities will open up. And so I'd spent about a year at this co-working space telling people about what I wanted to do and building relationships and saying I'm going to go out and do this business thing. And then one of the people I met basically said, "Hey, I know this guy who's doing like a video blog thing. He probably needs some production help. You should go meet him." And I said, "Sure, I'll meet this person." I had no idea what was going to come from this meeting, but it ended up being one of the most profound connections I ever made, because they had introduced me to a mentor of mine whose name's Toby, who runs a series of co-working spaces in Melbourne. And he became my next big mentor. And he took me under his wing and basically said, "I'm going to teach you business stuff if you edit, produce, and record videos for me." And so for the next year, I essentially just worked out of his office. And that was really the start of my business education.
Wow. I resonate with the whole idea of that crossroad of knowing I want to create my business, but there can be some grave consequences. For me personally, my immediate family live in South Africa, and mom and dad don't work, my sister doesn't work, and so my brother and I financially support them. So it's the
Mm,
risk of, what if my business fails? Then my mom and my dad and my sister are on the streets homeless. So there are these
mm,
not just tiny obstacles, but huge obstacles of, if something does go wrong, it has an impact. It's not as easy as, going back to mom and dad's home, living in Australia and growing up in Australia. There isn't mom and dad to go to if
yeah.
I fail. For me, if I fail, it's begging friends to look after me or finding
Mm,
something else, really, because I don't have that security familial network that in Australia,
mm,
being a migrant, in essence. So I completely relate to, here you are, you're working your ass off, and you're healing your trauma and changing your family in the process. And at some level, I know for myself, it feels even slightly selfish to put myself first, you
mm,
know, with the good things that are showing up in the so-called secure professional job. What would you
mm.
say to somebody who is like, but it's just so selfish for me to forge my own path and pursue my dreams?
I think it's the most selfless thing you can do to better yourself. And I think the best way that you can help anybody that you care about, your family, your friends, your partner, is by making yourself better. And I remember having that as a distinction of, it's not selfish. If I can build myself up more, then I can be a support to my family. I can help my wife, I can help my mum, I can help my brother. And really, that I think it was the first or second year of business, I built it up to the point where I hired my younger brother. And for me, that was quite affirming because it was just like, I've done it. He was suffering with the long-term unemployment thing too. And so me being able to build this thing allowed me to hire him and bring him in. So that's the way I think about it. I think making yourself better allows you to help others.
It's life-changing what you just said. Here, you bet on yourself, in
Mm,
essence, and took ownership of, I'm going to live life on my terms, and not knowing always the full impact or difference. But it's only on hindsight when you look back, it's like, wow, I've helped my wife, I've helped my mom, I've,
mm,
pulled my brother out of the cycle of unemployment, and he's
mm.
empowered. I've met your brother. You changed his life. It's
Yeah, it's
extraordinary what you've done.
yeah, it was really, really special, that whole experience for sure.
Yes. The other
Mm.
thing that you talked about was, once you knew what you wanted to do, you were sharing your vision, you were sharing your
Yeah,
commitment. I hear so many people saying that, oh, I'm not going to share my dream until I'm successful.
right.
But what you did was you shared, and doors started opening up for you.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And almost think of it as, I think of it as coming from a learner perspective. I'm trying to learn this skill. And so I think fundamentally you can learn any skill, or you can learn almost any skill. There might be things in, extreme performance and athletic things that maybe if you don't have that predisposition, maybe you can't do it. I'm probably not going to be a basketballer, for example, but I think most skills you have a pretty good chance of being able to learn those things. I didn't know anything about videography when I started. I didn't know anything about business when I started. These are all just skills that I've learned and developed over time. And so, with that in mind, I'm just looking at everything of how can I learn? And I'm sharing, not only to share my ideas and put it out there into the world, but also so I can get ideas from people. If I'm talking about, hey, I'm wanting to start this business, I'm trying to figure out this whole marketing thing. You're really good at marketing, and you've got this great marketing business. Can I get some advice? Can I ask some questions? Could you give me your 2 cents on this? That is so powerful. I think a lot of people are just assuming I have to be great at everything right at the start, which is such a limiting way to look at things. I just view it as, how can I get the information in the most fast and efficient way possible? And if that's having a level of humility and asking for help and advice and guidance from people, I see no issue with that. It just makes you go faster if you can get the information faster.
It's very powerful and a message everybody must hear. I remember early on in my business, I thought that I should already know how to be a business person. And because I thought I should already know, I never asked for help, which led to um, running out of money, being close to being bankrupt, and actually being homeless because
Right.
I was too proud to ask for help. But another
Mm,
way said was I thought I should already know. And I was crippled by shame because
mm.
this belief of I should already know was holding me back. What I love about your story is you're saying you come from the growth mindset.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me ask as many people and everybody out there.
Yeah.
And it has
A,
been of service to you.
Yeah, yeah. A friend of mine said it in such a blunt and simple way, but he's like, man, the fastest way to figure things out is just find someone who's done it, ask them how they've done it, and then just copy what they've done. It's like a hack, like it's an absolute hack because you just do it, like it halves the amount of time. And he said that in like such a casual and just blunt way. I'm like, but it's so true. Like me not asking anyone from help and going through all the pain and time it takes to learn something versus just finding someone who's really good and be like, hey, can you show me how you did that? And most people are really open to showing you.
Mm. Now, as you've been building Purpose Productions, what does Purpose Productions mean to you? Like, what keeps you going in all of this?
Yeah, I think these days purpose productions has more so become about how can I do business really well and build something I'm proud of. And so as I've gotten more and more into this, I've been doing this for 7 years now. I really view it as there are these different disciplines like finance, marketing, project management, systems and operations, vision. Like there's these different parts of a business. And what really excites me is getting really good at this whole process and being able to look at an entire business and say, I've built something great. There's no holes in the game. There's no parts that I'm unaware of. And it's taken a really long time to build this, but I've built something that's actually great. That is a huge driving force for me. And I suppose really where it comes from is this idea of growth. I like learning, I like building skills and seeing progress. That's what really excites me.
Amazing. So, what I'm also hearing is that you're clear about your values there that help you fuel purpose production, growth, learning, and the outcomes that come out of that.
Yeah. And one of those tapes that I listened to years and years ago, I think it was something like the guy was saying, uh, like, look how a tree grows. Like a tree grows as tall as it can be. It doesn't grow part or half. It's designed to grow all, assuming it has nutrients and light. That thing's designed to be all that it can be. Whereas humans, we limit ourselves so much and be less that we can be. And so I view that in the same way of everything that I'm trying to do, what's the natural progression of that? If I'm doing something like my martial arts, which jujitsu, the end goal is to get to a black belt. Of course, that's a really hard goal. It's going to take a very, very long time. But I view that as it's a natural consequence of starting that thing. That should be the goal. And in a similar way to business, it should be getting good at everything involved to build a great business. Or if it's writing a book, the end goal should be publishing that book and getting it to as many people as possible and writing a really good book that people will get value from. That's how I view these different things that I'm pursuing.
What is always very clear in your speaking is the specificity of what you want or your purpose as well
Mm,
in everything you're saying. And that seems to be a common theme with the people I interview. Very clear
mm.
purpose and mission, and always something greater than their circumstances, in essence. So for many people, starting a business or seeing your life may be like, well, that's good for you. That's not me. So on my show, I love people sharing openly and vulnerably, like what you're dealing with right now today and how you're working through it.
Yeah, like I think realistically, there are just constant challenges in business. And really like when I look back at my life and I look back at this journey, it's just been a series of really big challenges that have almost crippled me, almost made me give up and stop moving forward. And it's just this constant process of dealing with that, picking myself up, and then moving myself forward. I think the biggest one that I'm dealing with now, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is so I've got, 20 years of all this crap that I'm dealing with. I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to swear on the
Oh, yes,
show.
you can.
uh, so I've got, 20 years of all this stuff that I'm dealing with. I get through that. I spend the next 10 years working on myself, building up the business, trying to progress, trying to move forward and get to the next level. And I felt like I've dealt with so much of the things from my past. And then it was actually one of the things that you said, which was in one of our sessions, is like, James, it sounds like you were very enmeshed with your family. And I was like, what's enmeshed? Enmeshment? I've never heard of that word before. What is that? And you explained this concept of being so entangled in a family unit and you're so driven by guilt and obligation and groupthink that you can't think clearly. And it was like the penny just dropped. And I'm like, oh my God, I've lived my entire life still within this groupthink and this warped way of viewing the world. This is a long way of explaining this, but I assure you this as a payoff. Looking through all of that, and I really thought, is there anything I'm missing with my family and my whole past and everything that I've experienced? And the thing that started to niggle in the back of my mind was I know nothing about my culture. Part of why growing up was so hard is because we didn't have money, turmoil at home, mental health issues, substance abuse, but also no community. I'm Indian. My background is Indian-Malay, and part of my culture is hugely connected to family and community. But I never had that, and I never even questioned that that was a weird thing. And so that question that you asked me started me thinking about this. And I eventually started asking the question, why don't I know any of my culture or any of my family? I didn't know any extended families, aunties, uncles. It was just my immediate family. To cut a long story short, what I found is my dad had actually cut off all contact with my extended family, cut off from culture, cut off from everything. And over the past year, I've discovered long lost cousins, aunties, and family that have been looking for me my entire life. Some of
Wow.
which some of which live in Melbourne, close to where I live. So it's like there's so much in that. But that's the big thing that I'm dealing with at the moment is working through this and getting connected to culture.
So where have you discovered your family to be?
So I've always just grown up in Melbourne. I've never thought about being a worldly person. I never thought
Yes.
about India or Malaysia, but it turns out I have my family grew up in Singapore. I have an auntie who lives in Malaysia, another auntie in the UK in London. I've got an auntie in France, and I've got another auntie in Melbourne, and I have cousins all across the world. One who lives in Estonia.
Oh, that is crazy, James.
Absolutely crazy.
And so have you, it's such a big, this is huge. So are you reconnecting with them? How are you processing that? How does this impact your life?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's like the common theme with my whole story is just so much of what I've experienced is weird. It's odd. Like it doesn't make sense. Like it's such a strange thing to happen. I've reached out to every person I can find. I've spent time with them. We've had dinner and catch ups and many conversations. And I've got a trip to Malaysia coming up in September. I'm actually going to go and visit just the last auntie that I haven't met face to face. But yeah, it's been hugely emotional, huge impact. It's been a crazy piece of the story to deal with.
Wow. Now, being enmeshed with one's family is not reserved to you. Many people deal with
Yeah,
that, like
and
being
and and
Zimbabwean, being
and so and so so,
Greek. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. Just the exact point on that enmeshment thing is because I was so enmeshed, I never questioned my father. Why did you cut off connection? Why do I look Indian, yet I have zero connection? I don't know how to speak the language. I don't know anything about those countries. I don't have any connected community, where in reality, part of that culture is this deep, deep connection to community. But
Mm.
I was so enmeshed that it never even crossed my mind to ask that question.
Enmeshment is so awful because it literally blinds us, as you said. You
Yes.
you don't even know you don't even know when you're in it. You don't even know what questions to ask because you're enmeshed. It's a prison.
Yeah. Yes.
It's being in prison without even knowing you're in a prison itself.
Yes.
I'm
And
so happy
so
for you that you're going breaking
thank
through
you.
that.
Thank you. And, I said a little bit earlier that I have this idea of following things through, like completing things, or what's the natural progression of things. And that's why I've reached out to all these extended family members to rebuild those relationships. I've just assumed the natural progression is to rebuild all these relationships. I've traveled to all these different countries. I've had all these phone calls. I've just have it as a belief that my role here is to reconnect everybody, because that's just the right thing to do. In the same way that a tree is supposed to grow, family units are supposed to be connected, not broken apart.
Crazy, crazy what you're up to. Huge, huge. This is like practically healing generational
Mm,
trauma in your
mm.
family bloodline. You're cleaning up the blood. That's so powerful. I can't imagine anything greater than what you're up to right now.
Thank you.
How has your immediate family responded to you reconnecting to family that they have lived like don't exist?
Yeah, it's a good question. The relationship with my dad is very complicated, and unfortunately, I actually haven't spoken to him in a long time. So I think at any times with this, you got to take the good that comes in, and it's complex with family. Like not everybody's going to be on board, and not everything's going to be positive. But I'd say for at least me and my brother, who are really excited about all the possibilities of reconnecting, there was a moment for both of us where we just sort of felt like this very deep, like primal feeling of safety from meeting all these people and realizing, oh my gosh, like we have so much more connection than we ever thought we had. And we're not in these really stressful, anxiety, unsafe relationships. There's a level of stability there. Both of us have felt deeply like, oh, it's not just up to us to have a normal life or create this
Mm.
story. It's so much bigger than us now.
So powerful. I I connect to the idea of being separated from my family. I'm the
Mm,
only person in my family who lives in Australia. My brother lives in America, my sister and my mom and my dad are in South Africa.
mm,
But we have our own cultures. I've been away for
mm,
24 years. And as a teenager in Australia and discovering who I say I am, becoming,
mm.
I discovered I'm a gay man. And in Zimbabwean culture, that's illegal. You can go to
Yeah.
jail. You can be beaten up for that. In
Mm,
other countries, I could be murdered for
mm,
that. And so I've lived a lot of disconnection.
yeah.
And one thing that really helped me was starting to be authentic. When I
Mm,
decided I was going to be myself and show up as my full self, something new started being possible with my family, with my mom,
mm,
my dad, my brother, my sister. And for some of these relationships, it's taken decades for there to be love and affinity. So
yep.
I'm just so proud of you to be on this journey.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, it was your sort of questioning and this idea of enmeshment. That's really what started the whole thing.
Mm. So, one of my favorite questions: what does forging your own path mean to you?
What does forging your own path mean to me? I think it's just figuring out exactly what you want to do, and then navigating the way forward. It's taking the first step on this journey, and you don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to be, but it's taking the first step.
Powerful. What does figuring it out mean for you?
I think I like there's this really great fantasy series that I like. I love reading. I love all these different books. I'm really into it. And there's this line which I'll probably muck up, but the characters ask the question, "What's the most important step to take in a journey?" And he defaults to saying, "Well, the first step. The first step is the most important." And later throughout the story, he realized that that's actually false. The most important step is always the next step, because there's so many times where we can feel like completely giving up or ending the journey. But if you always have the mentality that no matter what happens, I'm always going to take that next step, that's the most important thing. Because if you stop, then the whole journey is over.
I so relate. This morning I woke up and I was like, why did I write a book? Why am I having a launch? Why have I used all my money to bring this to life? And
Right.
I just felt like, when is this going to stop? That's how I was feeling today. It's like, when is
Mm.
this going to stop? So a lot of self-pity this morning. And then I was like, Rugare, get over yourself. What
Mm.
is the next step here?
Yeah.
Focus on the next step. Because everything
Mm.
else that my brain is telling me, the fear of the unknown, what next was going to cripple me. It was going to
Mm.
rob me of power. It was going to rob me of action today. So that's very powerful saying, take the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
We often avoid failure. It's typically associated with being weak or not enough. Can you tell me when you have felt like a failure, when you have felt weak and not enough?
Yeah, I think many times, like I don't think that's ever going to stop. And I think it's actually a really normal part of life. It's a normal part of definitely building a business. Um, I think one that really comes to mind is when I was in university and I'd moved out of home. I was trying to get the best possible marks that I could. And I was also working a sales job that was commission only. And I really failed. I didn't hit the sales target that I needed, and I was falling behind on my grades. And I was so stressed and stretched in all these different ways. And I remember a day or a night at the uni, studying really late at night. And I was just thinking, I can't do this. I'm trying as hard as I can. I can't go back home. I can't ask for my parents for money. I'm just stuck in this situation and I'm not meeting the standards that I need to. I definitely felt like a failure.
Mm, I hear you. I'm right there with you with that. There's so many moments when I have felt weak and not enough. It's not just this one thing. And
Mm,
it's important that we normalize it. That's why I asked this question, because we live in this world of perfection. Like there's
mm,
no space for failure or these emotions of feeling weak and not enough. I feel that, but it
mm.
doesn't mean I can't continue my journey. It doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can't continue your journey.
Yeah. And I think if you're really trying to do something big, and I don't mean big as just in terms of building a big business, it could be big as in helping your family or changing your life or forging your own path, you're inevitably going to face these difficult situations. And the whole game is just figuring out how to get through these things. Like, how do I not let this be the end? And how do I not let this thing make me stop? Because there's many times where I could have just said, like, enough is enough. I just give up. But that's why I say that most important thing is the next step. Because if you just constantly take the next step and you never let the failure that you're facing now be the end, you're unstoppable. You just keep moving forward and
Mm.
learning. And yes, you fail and things don't go well. And really, as you get better, the problems just get worse and worse. They get bigger and bigger. But I'll tell you this, the problems that I deal with at this stage in my life and business, if I faced those when I was, 10 years ago, and the experience and grit and fortitude I had at that time, there's no way I could handle the things that I have now. And so it's like this journey of growth and development builds that strength in you so you can take on the next challenge that comes up.
Mm. And that's so powerful because this is where you talked about growth and perseverance. So even as you grow, their problems don't disappear, but how we approach the problems today
Yeah.
are different from 10 years ago. That's where the perseverance comes into this.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, I heard this quote the other day that if you're a leader in any respect, leader of a business, leader of a family, leader of a team, you're probably not going to have two great days in a row. And that's just part of it. And I think as soon the more we can normalize that and realize that's just part of it, I'm expecting bad things to happen and setbacks to happen. It's not like I'm constantly thinking about that, but I'm not surprised when they happen. I'm more so, all right, Kate, there's another one. Of course, this is going to happen. Let's get ready to deal with this and have some grace when we have to deal with it.
I love that. Yes, let us have some grace when dealing with life on life's terms. In Australia, we have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome, where people who achieve things in life, we want to tear them down. We actually do tear them down. So today, I want to celebrate your proudest moment. What is something you're so proud of?
What I think two things come to mind. One would be definitely being able to hire my younger brother, like coming from, public housing, building up this business, not having any, leg up. That was a hugely proud moment. I think the other one is getting married. So this year I got married, and it's not just like having the business in a point where it's stable enough for me to do that. And it's not just, building up the relationship with my wife and having our family be like that, but it's really like this contrast to how terrible my parents' relationship was to have such a strong and great relationship that I have with my wife. I feel like it's this great completion to that story arc. Like that is a huge, huge achievement for me.
James, I just acknowledge you for creating Purpose Productions and following your heart. Purpose Productions really amplifies people's purposes all around the world, but creating a space for your brother to
Mm,
thrive. You broke the cycle for yourself and for him from public housing to
mm.
empowered life. And thank you so much for being an example of not being your past, though in your past, your mom and dad, you know, did not fulfill their responsibilities as parents. You have created a loving relationship today.
Yeah,
So amazing.
thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Tell me how you keep joy in your life.
How do I keep joy in my life? I think gratitude is a really big part of it. Um, and I think just having things that you can do that are purely just for fun. Um, I think especially if you're trying to develop yourself in any way or going on this kind of a journey, it is stressful and it's challenging and you constantly sort of just go, go, go. And so I like having things in my life that are not self-development orientated, that are not business orientated. They're just purely for me to muck around and have fun with. Really, like jujitsu is one of the things that it's so not business. It's just fun. And I can be in a space where I have fun with it. I have joy with it. I'm just playing. I think that's really important. So you're just not constantly on the grind.
Amazing. Now we're going to go into one of my favorite rounds where you get to ask me a question. What question would you like to ask me?
Hmm. What do you think because you've done so much coaching, you've spoken to so many people. What do you think's the number one thing that holds people back in being their authentic self?
The number one thing that holds people back from being their authentic self. Gosh, I have many things that hold people back. It's interesting because for me, every person comes to me for a conversation. They're in different places. So for some people, it could be the society they were brought in that holds them back. So what mommy and daddy says they should do, what their teacher said they should do could hold them back, so it depends. So for me, growing up in Zimbabwe, definitely societal expectations held me back. But then for others, they may be things about themselves that hold them back for other reasons. But if I were to choose one thing, everything that holds every person back has something to do with an external idea about who they should be, that they think is who they are. So for example, a Black person thinking that they should be lighter. Where did they get that idea from? Or that being blonde and blue-eyed is sexy. Where did that idea come from? Or I should have perfect Instagram photos. Where did that idea come from? So the common denominator that I see with anybody that I speak with, including myself, is the thing that holds us back is some external idea that we live out as the truth without examining it. It's like enmeshment. It's a prison of some sorts, and it robs us of joy, freedom, peace of mind, our creativity. So being able to even examine what is that belief system that's in the way of my joy, my freedom, my power.
Yeah, I love that. It makes a lot of sense.
Great question. I love being put on the spot like that. I never know what's going to show up in these questions. Great. We're now going to go through the BAM lightning round, where you get to share incredible resources and mind-blowing answers. No pressure.
All right. No pressure.
Are you ready?
As ready as I'm ever going to be, yes.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Don't be afraid to fail.
What is one of your personal habits which has led to your success?
Waking up early in the morning.
How are you preparing for growth of AI in your everyday life?
By embracing it, by using it as much as I can, and learning how it all works.
If there is a book you would recommend, what would it be and why?
Good question. I'd say anything by Michael Singer would be great.
And who is he and what?
So he's like a modern spiritual person who writes these amazing books that just helps you be less stressed about the things that come up in your life.
Great. Which one of your role models would you have over for a dinner party?
Good question. I'd love to meet someone like Ed Milet, who's a big self-development person in America. I'd love to meet him face to face and have a dinner with them.
Great. What do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for really showing people what's possible in terms of I've started with essentially nothing and I've built up this life, this business, this story. And I want to be an example of how other people can do that too.
Amazing. And there ends our BAM lightning round.
All right.
I have thoroughly enjoyed your story, James. How can people find you and contact you?
Thanks. Me too. This has been great. I'm on Instagram at James Shadrach. I'm on LinkedIn at James Shadrach. And our website for Purpose is purposeproductions.co.
Great. And how can people work with you?
Yeah, if someone wants to work with us, you can reach out to us on purposeproductions.co. We've got all our contact details there, or you can just outreach to me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. So thank you again, James, for being on the show. And thank you to our audience. You can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn for more juicy stories from me. My favorite ones are LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome.